to start the event. Good morning. Assalamualaikum. Salam sejahtera, salam kebajikan. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. It is an honor to be here as the master of the ceremony to this morning event. Good morning. Assalamualaikum. Salam sejahtera, salam kebajikan. My name is Evorio Karel Prabata, and I am a student of law in the University of Jember. And I am delighted to welcome the speaker, Shane Alstrand, PhD, University of New England, the moderator, Igede Widiana Swarda, PhD, Dean Dr. Bayu Dwi Anggono, and all the participants to this virtual meeting, international public lecture entitled Navigating, Australian an experience as an Australian student. Before we start this meeting, let us honor this event with Indonesia's national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Please, for the appointed officer, time is yours.
To Pak Abbas, please. You can play the video, Pak Abbas.
Thank you. And I would like to re-mention the speaker. It is moderator Igede Widiana Suarda, PhD, Dean Dr. Bayu Dwi Anggono, and Mr. Brandon Barrio from Herbert Smith Freehills, QUT Law Alumni Australia. And then we would like to return the welcoming mark by the Dean. We would like to request the Dean to open the event officially. For the Dean of the Faculty of Law, time is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good morning. The Honorable Brandon Barrio, Solicitor at Herbert Smith Freehills and Queensland University of Technology Law Alumni as the speaker. Igede Widiana Suarda, PhD, Head of Department of Criminal Law, Faculty of Law, University of Jember as moderator. Lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of Jember, all participants of this international public lecture. As the Dean of Faculty of Law, University of Jember, I am pleased to meet Brandon Barrio as the speaker and welcome the participant of the international public lecture entitled Study Law and Experience of Australian Students, organized by the Faculty of Law, University of Jember. For your information, all participants, this international public lecture has been regularly held by Faculty of Law, University of Jember since the end of last year in order to improve the academic quality and quality of graduate at both undergraduate and postgraduate program. And this event is the third international public lecture that we have organized. As information to Brandon Barrio, University of Jember is a state university in East Java province with 15 faculties and approximately 35,000 students, and 2,500 of them come from the Faculty of Law. The higher education ranks in 2021, based on the Webometric rank, the University of Jember sit at the 10th rank of the best university in Indonesia. To me, the topic of this public lecture is interesting, considering that the comparison of the learning process of law college with other countries is necessity. Through a comparative study with other countries, Indonesian students will gain knowledge of how other countries administer legal education at university, so that it can enrich our insight and we can adopt the relevant things. Notwithstanding, for sure, the administration of legal higher education between countries has difference. However, the direct lecture like this remain necessary because there is a direct interaction, despite its accessibility through the literature. Therefore, let us make use this opportunity for international public lecture. To end my welcome speech, I would like to thank Brandon Barrio, who I hope one day will be able to visit Jember directly again, because I know Brandon have already come to Jember maybe in 2019, I think. Thank you, Pak Gede, Widiana Suarda, and the committee for preparing this event. Finally, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I officially open this international public lecture. Thank you, the committee and participants. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Dean, for the speech and opening for this event. And the last would be the prayer. by Mr. Fiska Maulidian Nugroho. Time is yours.
Thank you, Karel. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back, Jember, Brandon. Okay, thank you. And good morning, all participants, our team, lecturers, students, alumni, and Om Santi Om, Salam Kebajikan. First of all, let us praise and thank the presence of Allah Almighty for the abundance of grace and the joy of all us can still gather, although only on camera, at least in your place, without any barriers at all, and in good health. Not forgetting the salawat and increasing we pour out to the Prophet Muhammad who has brought us out of the dark age to the era of bright light today, namely Islam. May we all get intercession on the end. I mean, secondly, thanks to our team, Dr. Bayu Dwi Anggono, who allowing us to commit and implementing one of arranging the international public lectures and creating. We also conveyed to Mr. Chet that bringing back Brendan Barrier as alumni of South Course 3 years ago. Hello, Brendan. Did you still to remember a delicious of sambal and fried rice at Timber? And now, the team who always works hard to success this class. God bless this team. And third, please to each one keep the head to bow during praying, and I will lead to our prayer. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma inna nas'aluka salamatan fid dini wal afiyatan fil jasad wa sidatan fil ilmi wa barakatan fil rizqi wa taubatan qabla maut wa rahmatan indal maut wa maghfiratan ba'dal maut. Allahumma hawin alaina fi syukratil maut wa najid min ahwal inda hisab. Rabbi fili dunubi wali walidayya warhamhuma kama rabbana shukra rabbana atina fid dunya wal akhirati hasanah wa qina adzabannar wa qina adzabannar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin nabiyil ummi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barakatuh. Wassalam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Dear God Allah Subhanahu wa taala, I pray for you, Lord of mankind. Please enhance my knowledge and please cover me with the light of comprehension. Ya Allah, I entrust you in my Lord with what I have studied. Please bring it to me when I need it. Ya Allah, our God, you are the merciful and the best of aid. Amin, 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 ya Rabbal Alamin. Thus, this prayer has been finished. I thank you for your attention. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks, God, for the attention. Time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Fiska. Okay, this opening session is finished, and we are now continuing the next agenda, the discussion. The discussion will be handled by Mr. Gede. So I forward to Mr. Gede as the moderator of the discussion. Time is yours, Mr. Gede.
Thank you to Karel. Can you hear me, Karel?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan for all of us. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the Honorable Dean, our Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Jember, Pak Dr. Bayu Dwi Anggono, for a welcoming speech and also for opening this international public lecture officially. As you mentioned that this is the third international public lecture hosted and organized by the Faculty of Law, University of Jember. Thank you very much, Pak Bayu. Secondly, I would like to extend my gratitude to my colleague, my friend, Mr. Brandon Berrio. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation and being with us today, Brandon. Long time no see. Asian people say, long time no see, Brandon. You went to Jember in 2018, 3 years ago, and we miss you so much. I think most of my students want to meet you again in Jember. Hopefully you can visit Jember someday, like my dean has been mentioned previously. So we actually so keen to invite our colleague in Australia to come and visit us in Jember. Again, thank you very much to Brendan Berrio for being with us today. And then to all the participants, thank you very much for coming along and joining this program, the third International Public Lecture. This one is about study law and experience of Australian student. This is a really interesting topic for my student, particularly because they study law in the Indonesian environment and also in the context of Indonesia. But today they're going to listen from Australian students how they study law in Australia and how about legal education in Australia. To all of you, my name is Igede Widiana Swarda. As part of the committee and also as part of the Faculty of Law, University of Jember, I'll be moderating the sessions. Just a quick note that this IPL, we call it IPL, International Public Lecture, so we call it IPL. This IPL will be recorded. Please be aware of it. If you have your camera on, make sure you turn it off if you don't want your video to be shared on the social media later on. But if you want a video to be shared on social media, you can please turn your camera on. It's all good for you to make a decision whether you turn it off or you turn it on your camera. But for me, turn it on is better. For those who don't know what IPL program is, I want to say once again, because Maidin already mentioned about this program. This is a regular academic program and discussion session with international speaker worldwide. We're going to discuss particularly legal and justice issues worldwide. So in this third IPL, as I mentioned previously, we're going to discuss about legal education and studying law in Australia with Mr. Brendan Berrio, who is a solicitor now in Australia. So give me to say 1 more minute to introduce you, Brendan, and I will pass it over to you. Mr. Brendan is currently working at Herbert Smith Freehills. He is a solicitor at Herbert Smith Freehills, and he is a graduated law student from Faculty of Law, Queensland University of Technology, Australia, in July 2020. So it's just last year. Congratulations, Brendan, you finished your study and you successfully enter a working environment at the moment. It's really nice to hear about that. I think I would like to mention a bit about Brendan because he went to Jember as Pak Fiska and Pak Din mentioned. Brendan has been visiting and also coming to Jember about discussing about illegal logging in Jember East Java in 2018. So it's a good relationship with QT alumni because we have a program in the future to make a good collaboration with our colleague worldwide. Thank you very much, Brendan. So today, not holding you any longer. Again, I want to say thank you for being with us, and over to you, Brendan. Thank you very much, Brendan. You have about 20 to 25 minutes to present your ideas and your experiences, and then we're gonna followed by Q&A session. Please, Brendan.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Geta. Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I think, is it all right if we get the slides up, Geta, if that's all right?
Yes, wait a second.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, sweet.
Yeah. Can you see my screen, Brendan?
Yeah, should be all good.
Yes, please.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. So we'll just go to the next slide if that's all right. Awesome. So I think I've been introduced enough now, but just in case, I'll just say it again. So I graduated last year from QUT in July. So I graduated with a Bachelor of Laws, and I also did another degree, Bachelor of Business, and I was in University of Jemba in 2018. So you probably can see the picture of the right. I actually can't quite remember where that was, but it was a very nice place. I should say that video that you guys played before was really cool. I thought it was really well done. A bit of flashbacks, seeing the campus, which is really cool. And so that was me on the left is my graduation picture. And then, yeah, so now I'm a solicitor, Herbert Smith Freehills. I'm not too sure, maybe anyone would have heard of it, maybe not. But they're mainly big in Australia and London. I think there is an Indonesian association, but I'm not 100% sure. So I might just go to the next slide now, get it, if that's all right. Awesome. So in terms of where you can study law in Australia, I think there's over 40 law schools in Australia, which is quite a lot. There's actually even options you can study law completely virtually in Australia. So you don't actually have to even come into like campus or go to classes. So you can just do it all online, or you can do it in person. So I went to the Queensland University of Technology, so QUT, and there you do sort of like a mix of virtual and in person. But I normally like to go to my classes because I never really learn that well online. So which was a bit of a challenge with the last year in terms of the pandemic, so everyone had to study at home. So, but we get through it. And that last picture there, you can see that's sort of the campus. Well, it's one part of the campus. It's quite a big campus. And so we'll just go to the next slide, if that's all right. Okay, awesome. So this is sort of like the structure of the law degree. And I mean, the structure sort of changes between each university that you go to. But so this is sort of the QT structure. I thought I would talk more about that considering that's where I went to university. And so it's on the Gardens Point campus. So it's actually in the middle of the Brisbane CBD, so in the city. So it's actually pretty convenient, particularly if you work in the city, so you can go straight from work to university, which a lot of people do. And if you do just a law degree full time, so that means it's broken up into 2 semesters each year with 4 units normally in each semester. And that will take you about 4 years, but you don't always have to do it that way. You can do it part-time, which is normally 2 subjects a semester, so 4 subjects a year, and that will take you about 8 years. And in the whole degree, there's about 19 like core units that you need to do. There's 2 introductory electives, 8 general law electives, and there's 2 advanced law electives. In general, I've got a few notes here. So in the first year, it's sort of like a holistic sort of experience, and it's more about getting the foundation of the legal skills and the capabilities that you need to be a successful learner and a legal professional. And you gain a real strong understanding of the law of torts. There's a big focus in the first year. So looking at negligence, damages, and sort of no-fault compensation schemes. We do a lot of legal interviewing and legal problem solving. It's also our first introduction to criminal law in the first year. And we also look at the variety of contexts in which Australian law operates and developing a positive professional identity through sort of dispute resolution and a unit, and which is a big focus of the first year. And in that first year is also the year that you choose your 2 introductory law electives, or you can just do 1 introductory law electives and 1 general law electives. And then in year 2, so it gets a bit more advanced, and you look at skills mainly in contract law, legal research, equity and trusts, constitutional law, administrative law, and commercial property law. And again, in that year again, you can click, so you can select 2 general law electives again. And you can also elect from that point to do a minor. So we don't really have any majors all minors QT anyway, and it's not really very popular in law degrees in Australia. But at QT in particular, you can do one minor. It's a law and technology sort of focus. So it's pretty interesting. It's only been around since 2019. And so it's sort of aimed to prepare the graduates to be adaptable legal professionals who are prepared for new careers that revolve around innovation and technology. So topics that they cover in the minor include how the law is responding to new developments in artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, and autonomous vehicles. So sort of a new thing. I didn't get the chance to do it because it was introduced after I could really pick it up, but I know that there's a few students that are starting to do it now that it's an option. And in that third year, you can do another 2 electives, and then you focus more on real property law, corporate law, evidence, ethics, civil procedure, and commercial remedies. And then in that last year, it's mainly just electives, particularly the electives that will build up your honors. So I'm not sure if so on the first slide I graduated with first class honors. So it goes like first class honors, second division A, second division B, and then third class honors. So at QT in particular, you have to do honors to graduate, but it's not necessarily like that in every degree in Australia. It just happens to be a QT thing. And then I think you can see from here, I've got on the slides as the Priestley 11, the core law subject. So even though the electives will change between the universities, those 11 the Priestley 11 core law subjects have to be taught legally, like by law, in all law degrees in Australia. So no matter where you go to law school in Australia, you'll learn at least those 11 core subjects. And interestingly, once you go to become a lawyer, if you actually haven't done one of these 11 subjects, they'll actually reject your application. You won't be allowed to become a lawyer. You actually have to go back to university and do whatever subject that you're missing there. So it's pretty interesting. So all unis have to really make sure that they cover all these 11 subjects. I think we'll just go to the next slide, if that's all right. Awesome. Yeah, so here's a few of the electives that we have here, particularly at QT, but I think a lot of them are quite consistent across all the universities. I see the International Legal Clinic one is the one that I did to come to the University of Jemba. So it's actually a pretty interesting elective. So you get to go overseas and participate in an international course. I think there's a few. There's some in Cambodia, I think some in Vienna, and then there's one obviously in Indonesia, which I did. I also did independent research. So I think from memory, I remember in Indonesia, you've got to do a thesis. I think in Australia, you actually don't have to. It's, well, at QT anyway, it was an option. So it's an elective, you don't have to do one. Some might say crazy, but I chose to do it because I thought it was interesting. If anyone's interested, I did my thesis on competition law and Google and Facebook, sort of like the misuse of market power by Google and Facebook in Australia. So I found that would be pretty interesting. And I also did, based on the screen, I think I did public international law as well, which was really interesting. So we focused on, I'm not too sure if many people would have heard of it, but I think Greta Thunberg was doing this climate change litigation. So that was a big focus of that subject. It was pretty interesting to learn about. And they also did intellectual property law. And unfortunately, you can't really do all of them. So you can only do about, I think it was like 6 or 8. So you definitely have to pick the ones that you're most interested in. So I think we'll go to the next slide, if that's all right. Okay, cool. And then actually in most universities in Australia, you can actually combine law with a different degree. So it's called like a double degree. And so that's what I did. I did it with business, as I underlined there, but it extends your degree a bit past the 4 years, which I said before. So it makes it 5.5 years. But at the end of the day, you'll come out with 2 degrees. So some people prefer that. And there's a heaps of options, as you can see on the screen. So I know a lot of people do it with science, which is pretty interesting. So it's a bit of two opposite things. So it's law and science. And then a lot of people do it with justice, particularly it's a pretty popular combination for people who want to be police officers. They'll often do law and justice. And I think more and more people are doing information technology as well as it becomes more relevant. But I did it with business, particularly international business, which I found actually to be pretty useful recently, because at work I mainly focus on Japanese mergers and acquisitions. So I don't really do a lot of Australian clients. So it's a bit interesting to use my knowledge from that degree. So that's sort of when I think the double degree can be quite useful. And I don't really think it's a very common thing around the world. I think it's something that's probably quite unique to Australia to do 2 degrees at the same time, as opposed to doing 2 degrees one after each other. So just go to the next slide if that's all right. Cool. So I think one of the greatest things that I did through my university sort of career was all the extracurricular stuff that I did. There's only a few of them, but as you can see, there's a big focus on that. At QT in particular, they have a lot of opportunities to go overseas. So obviously I had the International Legal Clinic, which we talked about. And then I also got a scholarship to go to the OECD conference in Paris in May 2019, which you can see the picture of me, the Eiffel Tower, looking very touristy. So I got that scholarship based off a policy submission that I made on how to increase youth voter engagement using virtual reality in Australia. I've since got the paper published, which is pretty cool. It's on the Global Voices journal. I thought it was one of those really interesting experiences that I would say not necessarily very tied to law, but it was something that I could do at university. A lot of the opportunities at QT in particular, you don't necessarily have to be a law student to do law opportunities, or they're not always into one bubble. So you can be from a different sort of degree and do opportunities that are related to other things. So I think the Global Voices Scholarship was definitely more of a policy sort of scholarship, as opposed to a very strict sort of legal thing. And then the last thing was case competition. So that was completely non-legal related, actually. That was business. So it's like management consulting. So I got to go to Vancouver, I think just before the pandemic hit. I was actually I was on the first flight home after the travel ban from Australia. So it was a bit tight of a timing, but we got to compete in Vancouver. As you can see in the picture down there, we sort of get business problems, real world business problems, and you sort of make slide decks and solutions to it, and you present to representatives of the company's board. Yeah, it's a really interesting sort of extracurricular opportunity that they have in Australia, particularly at QT. And I think we'll just go to the next slide if that's all right. Awesome. So the clerkships and internships stage is probably, I'd say, probably the most stressful part of law school in Australia. This is sort of the traditional way to get employed after law school, but it's definitely not the only way, but it's just more the traditional route. So it's when law students in their second last year of law school, so they get the opportunity to do a clerkship at a law firm. So I think it's pretty interesting. It's in the second last year. So there isn't very many clerkships, like formal clerkships, in your last year of university. It's mainly in your second last year. And so you compete, I wouldn't say competing, but you're trying to get an offer to work at the firm after graduating university. They typically last 3 to 4 weeks, and you do them in between the breaks in your holidays between your semesters. So in between semester 1 and 2, and then in between semester 2 and 1 of the following year. So you can do up to 4 clerkships, but they're very, very competitive. I think it's something, I can't remember what the statistic that I heard, so maybe don't quote me on it, but yeah, I thought it was something along the lines of like only 4% of law students get a clerkship. So it's like there's thousands of applicants, and then the firms probably only take roughly 20 just for the clerkship. And then of that 20, they might take 10 of that 20 to get a job the next year. So it's pretty it's pretty competitive. And I think a lot of that goes to how many law schools there are in Australia, particularly in Queensland. So you get people from all over Queensland applying to the same firms, which are all really in the Brisbane CBD. On the right hand, you can see some of the firms. These are sort of the big 6 firms in Australia. So they're sort of called the top tier firms. But they're definitely not the only firms that do the clerkship. There's quite a few. I think there'd probably be over 20 firms that do clerkships. On the screen of the ones that I did here, I did a clerkship obviously at Herbert Smith Freehills. I did one at Allen's Linklaters, and I did one at Ashurst. I also did another one at DLA Piper, which isn't on the screen. And obviously in the end, I ended up picking Herbert Smith Freehills. But the clerkship process is really sort of where you get to see how law firms really operate and what it's like to really practice law in Australia. I think universities, particularly QUT, try their best to give you that practical experience whilst you're at university. But it is obviously, it's never really the same as actually being in a firm and seeing how it all operates. So we'll just go to the next slide, if that's all right. Cool. So then there's heaps of careers that you can do. A law degree can really take you in Australia. So we've got private practice. So that's what I do. So working in a private practice commercial firm, but you can also go in-house to be lawyers at a company, not necessarily a law firm. You can go into government, ministerial advisors, court registrars, public prosecutors and public defenders, so more criminal law, crown lawyers, community legal centers, alternative dispute resolution, and you can go into the more academic side and law librarian and legal publishing. Let me just go to the last slide, I think it is. Awesome. Yes, this is a pretty interesting stage. Once you actually graduate, I always thought originally that once I graduated, that was it. Like I was a lawyer, but apparently not. So once you finish your law degree in Australia, you actually can't practice law or sort of give legal advice straight away. It's not until you're a solicitor. It's a bit of a lengthy process, but nowhere near as long as getting the degree itself. So from memory, you have to complete your practical legal training, and that normally takes about 6 months or 1 year part-time, depending. And you sort of focus on the practical and day-to-day legal skills. And it will be a bit of a recap of what you learned at university, but also require you to do actual work experience at a firm if you want to complete it. And then once you've completed the course, you can apply to whatever court that is nearest to you, so whatever state that you're in. So I applied to Supreme Court of Queensland to be admitted into the roll of lawyers. And that's what those pictures on the slide look like. So that's me with my certificate, and that's me signing the roll, so to be officially a lawyer. But then even after then, it's still not the end of it. You need to then do a little application to get your practicing certificate with the Law Society. And then once you get that certificate, and then you're technically a solicitor, I believe. So yeah, so it's a bit of a process, but obviously there's other stuff that you can do after you graduate. Not everyone wants to become a solicitor. A lot of people go and do their masters. I think it's pretty popular in Australia in particular to go actually to England to do your masters. I know a lot of people go to sort of Oxford and Cambridge in London to do their masters. But a few people also do it in Australia. QT, so University in Melbourne are popular places. And then a lot of other people sort of just go down the other paths that I was saying before. They don't necessarily actually require you to go through this process. This process for becoming a solicitor is either because you want to practice law, or maybe you just want to be recognized as a solicitor. And then so just go to the last slide. I think it's the last slide. Yes, it should be. So what do I do now? So as I said before, I'm a graduate solicitor at Herbert Smith Freehills. I'm in the mergers and acquisitions team. So it's like essentially just buying and selling companies. I've only really started as a graduate in the past 2 months. But I've been a paralegal at the firm since I did my clerkship. So that would have been 2018, I want to say. No, 2019, I want to say. About 2 years I've been at this firm in particular. So yeah, so just go to the last slide. I think is one more. Yeah, so I think that was about it. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, either about what my experience studying law, or maybe what I do now, whatever, I don't really mind. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brendan. It's an informative presentation, and also it's so clear about how to get a Bachelor of Laws in Australia and what you can do after you finish your law degree in Australia. So to all the participants, if you have any question, you are pleased to raise your hand, and I will pass to you to ask Brendan's question, or maybe some questions. You are pleased to do that. But before we go to Q&A session, Brendan, and to all the participants, we have a break for a moment, maybe for a minute. We gonna show you a video. It's an Indonesian folk song. To Pak Abbas, please be prepared, and then you can please share the video to all of us. We have a break for maybe 1 minute, Brendan. And against to all the participants, you can please raise your hand and you can deliver your question directly to Brendan. I think he are happy to reply your questions and everything's about legal education in Australia. To Pak Abbas, are you ready, Pak Abbas? Pak Abbas? To Pak Abbas, are you ready?
Masak sabigi di hurung bari-bari, ngalepak manggalepok, patah kayu bengkok, bengkok dimakan api, apinya cengcurupan, nang marah batis kutung, dikiti bidawang, nang marah batis kutung, dikiti bidawang. Ampar-ampar pisangku belum masak, masak sabigi di hurung bari-bari, mangga-lepok, patah bengkok, bengkok dimakan api, yang curupun, yang mana batis kutung, dikit bidawang, yang mana batis kutung, dikit bidawang.
Thank you, Pak Abbas. And now we are open Q&A session to all the participants. If you have questions, please, you can ask Brendan. But I have a question for you, Brendan, before I pass to the participants who maybe want to ask you a question. I want to get more information about practical legal training in Australia. You mentioned that you have to join and pass practical legal training for 1 year. If I'm wrong, just correct me. And then after you finish practical legal training, and then you are, able to apply to be a solicitor. Is that correct? So can you explain a bit more about practical legal training in Australia, please?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, that's it. Most people do it part-time, so it takes about a year. But I did it full time just because I had enough time between I started work and when I finished uni. So I did it full time. So it's basically, I would say it's almost in a way, it's a mini, like condensed sort of law degree. You definitely just do a lot of recap of what you've learned, but then a lot of applying it to real world sort of scenarios. So you do a lot of client advice and sort of what it would be, what type of work you would do as a lawyer, but you do it throughout the course. And you focus a lot on sort of ethics. I think it was a big focus on, because it's not necessarily something that you get taught at university. All those interesting little scenarios that will come up with clients that university don't necessarily have the time to teach you. So it's sort of where you will learn a lot of ethical dilemmas and how you approach those sort of situations. You learn a lot about trusts, so like trust accounting and billing. So all of the stuff about actually being a lawyer that you might not learn at university, you do that through the course. And like I said, you actually have to do work experience, which is not necessarily something you need to do whilst you're at university. And because of COVID, though, there was a bit interesting because not many people were obviously hiring during that period. So they have an option to do sort of like a work experience program that they developed themselves. But before that, I believe it was like you actually have to go to a firm and work there for a few. It's not very long. I'd say it's about 30 days of actual work experience. Relatively speaking, it's not that long to the whole course. But yes, it's something that you need to do, and it's normally offered in Queensland anyway by either the College of Law or QT has their own program as well. So you normally just do it straight after, I would say. But an interesting thing is that you don't necessarily need to have finished your PLT, so that practical legal training, to be employed at a law firm. So you can still get a job as sort of like a graduate at a law firm, and they can sort of hire you whilst you complete your practical legal training. And then once you finish it, they'll facilitate the process of becoming a lawyer. So that's sort of what I did. So I started my practical legal training, but I was already working at Herbert Smith Freehills. So they sort of, I worked in that capacity, and they sort of facilitated me doing the practical legal training at the firm. And then once I finished it, we went into the process of becoming a lawyer, and now I'm a solicitor.
Great, thank you very much. So can you do that in other university throughout Australia, or you should do that at QUT? I'm a bit curious about it, Brendan. So
I'm pretty sure, well, the practical legal training is a national requirement, I'm pretty sure. So all lawyers have to do it. But I'm pretty sure there'd be other universities around Australia that do it. In Australia, in Queensland, it's mainly QT and College of Law of the most popular ones. College of Law is probably the most popular in Australia. It's sort of like the go-to, I'd say. But other universities around Australia are popping up with their own courses. So students that graduate from the university can just go straight into that course that they offer.
Okay. Thank you, Brendan. All right, now to the participant. If you have question to Brendan, you are pleased to ask Brendan. I think Rizky Pancabudi texting me. He wanna ask you a question. Rizky Pancabudi, you with us online?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, please. You can ask Brendan.
I learned about development economy that we learn some issues when the pandemic from the economy perspective, but I never heard about the issue when the pandemic with the law perspective. Can you just explain it?
Pardon, what was that, sorry?
The issue of when in the pandemic era in the perspective of law.
Oh, I think it's law and pandemic issues, Brendan. Maybe your opinion about law and pandemic issue. Is that right, Rizky?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, sorry, law and what, sorry?
Pandemic, COVID-19 issues.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In terms of like law school, like my experience at law school and the pandemic.
Yes, I think so because in Indonesia it's impacted a lot to law
Oh, okay.
students. Yeah, we cannot go everywhere, just stay
Yeah.
at the uni and then doing lecture via online totally.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
what's your opinion on it? I think that's the question, Brendan.
Yeah, okay. Well, I only really had to do, I was pretty lucky. I only had to do one semester, sort of virtually. And I know at QT, when the pandemic hit, we all had to go to virtual classes. I didn't personally learn very well virtually. I'm definitely more someone who learns in person. But I think for some people, honestly, it didn't really make a difference because at QT, you can do your whole law degree virtually, and a lot of people did that because you get a lot of people from rural cities who can't necessarily come all the way to the city to do their classes, so they did it virtually. So I think for people like in those situations, it wasn't really much of a difference. But I think there was definitely an adjustment period for people, I guess, like me who are used to going to classes. But I think one thing we were pretty lucky with in Australia is that it got contained quite quickly. And I think not many people were studying virtually for that long, I don't think. And at QT, they were quite understanding. If you failed a unit, I'm pretty sure during the whole pandemic situation and virtual learning, they actually didn't count it to your academic record. You did have to do the subject again, but just that failing grade wouldn't go towards your grade point average, which I think was probably a good thing for a lot of people because there was a lot of extenuating circumstances. Obviously there was people's relatives getting sick and wasn't always the best learning environment. So I think in that respect, I think Australian law schools handled it quite well. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Brendan, for sharing with us about the situation in Australia in law school and also the COVID-19. I think, in Australia is very good to handle COVID-19 pandemic, and you are no guys can go to school and go to uni quite freely. It's totally different with us in Indonesia because we are not allowed to go to uni and go to school until now. So we are studying from home. So that's why we also make this international public lecture online. Hopefully we can make offline in the future, and we will ask you to come to visit us in Chamber someday, Brandon. Okay, the next question is coming from Setiawan. I think you remember Setiawan. He is also part of short course in the past. So Setiawan, you still with us? You can ask the question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yep.
Good morning, Brandon and everyone. Can you still remember me?
Of course,
my name. And we did a gym together in Myotel, right? Without paying anything. That's crazy. Okay. First of all, I wanna say hi to you and my greetings to you and the other friends. Send my greetings to Jess, Kathy, and Kali, Ashley, and other friends that you still keep in contact. Yeah, and also it's like a great time to see you there, to see you here. There are some questions. First is about what is the difference between learning in being a student in Australia for 4 years and 5.5 years. I mean that if we have like a 5.5 years in Australia, we will get a double degree, right? But if we just take for 4 years, we will only have like 1 degree. What is the yeah? So the question is, what is the difficulties to achieve some legal job between those two, like education before, like 4 years and 5.5 half years. The second one is Do you know data about how many percent law student in Australia, I mean law student alumni in Australia, that continue their subject or continue their job to be a legal expertise, or they just like randomly getting a job? Because in Indonesia, we have a lot of like law student alumni that have not continue their study or even their job in the same subject. For example, they are law student alumni, but they work in like a bank as a teller or something like that, or customer service. So it's in related. So do you have like data about that? How many percent law student alumni in Australia not continuing their work in the same subject or in the same field? Thank you, Brenda.
Yeah. Awesome. Nice to see you again. Thank you for the questions. So I think I'll go with the first question first. So in terms of how it actually works is, so the way that they do it in terms of how you can get the 2 degrees in 5.5 years is on that second, what they do is you actually do all your core units still, but the way they make it so that you can actually finish in 5.5 years is you have less electives than someone who's doing, say, the 2 degrees separately. So for example, if I did my full law degree and then I did a business degree, it would take me 6 years. Sorry, it would take me 7 years to do that. So the way they combine them is that, so you can do both at the same time and finish in 5.5 years, is that you get less electives. So you don't do as many electives as someone who did 2 full degrees, but that doesn't actually impact the qualification at all. So you still have 2 full degrees. Is that how I believe it works? And so how it will work is, say, for my typical semester, say for my first year, in my first semester, I've got 2 law units, and then I'll have 2 business units.
Okay.
And then that will basically be what I do all semester until about year 3. And by year 3, I would have finished all the business units that I need to finish. And then I'm just doing straight law until the end of the 5.5 years. So you add on a little bit of time, but you actually save quite a bit of time in the end, which is why a lot of people do it. And it doesn't really impact any hiring prospects, because they have the clerkship process that I described is like a yearly intake. So it doesn't really matter how long you really take for your degree. You'll always be able to at least qualify in your second last year. So if you did the 4-year degree, you just do it in your second year of university. If you are doing the 5.5 year, like me, you just do it in your around 3.5 years. So it doesn't really impact you getting a job. I mean, for some people, it actually makes you more like a more attractive employee because you have 2 degrees, but not always. I think it depends really on where you're applying. I think like if you're applying to a very firm that's very focused on technology, then maybe if you did a degree in law and technology, you'd look better. But I guess it really would just depend. And in terms of your second question, I don't necessarily have any specific data, but I would say it'd probably be a very similar situation here. I know a lot of people who have a law degree that are nothing to do with law right now. I think one point of that would be how difficult it is to get a job, particularly in Australia. And the other thing, I think maybe people, they might like to do the law degree, but they realize whilst they're maybe practicing law just isn't for them. Because I think one thing that I've noticed from actually working in a law firm and actually studying law is that it's very different. It's very different. So I think a lot of people realize that it's maybe just not for them. I know a lot of people become investment bankers from a law degree. A lot of them become sort of consultants, and all of them just do something completely non-legal related. And I think that's why a lot of people do double degrees, particularly at QT, just to make sure they have a different avenue if they don't want to go into law. They've got a second degree they can sort of verge into. So I know a lot of people who have like a law and science degree, they tried law, it was like not for me, and now they're more science researchy fields. So yeah, hopefully that answers it. So
Yes, that's really answered me. Thank you.
All right.
thank
All right.
you.
Yep. Thank you, Brendan. And thank you, Satyawan, for the question. I have a question before I pass to Kiagus. Kiagus, want to ask you as well. I wanna know maybe a bit personally, Brendan, but it's really important for my students and my colleagues in Indonesia. What is your reason to choose to study law? Because comparing to Indonesian and my students, they are, you know, at the beginning, they don't have any idea about study law, just pick it up and then let's go to uni. So they don't have any a clear idea at the beginning of the uni life. And I want to ask you, do you have an experience? Why do you choose law? A bit personally, but I need to listen from you. Thanks, Brendan.
I think initially I was in the exact same boat. I didn't really understand, but whilst I went through my degree, I realized that I really liked problem solving. It's something that I enjoyed, and I'm very bad at math, so I didn't really have it. I went into law instead. But it's something that I really enjoyed, sort of getting that satisfaction of solving the problem, because it's really rewarding once you go through all the legal analysis to come to a conclusion that you're sort of happy with. And I think I even enjoyed it more once I start to saw the practical applications of it. Particularly, I think with a business degree as well. Once I got to see how you can use the law in commercial environments, I saw the practical application of it, and I thought that was really interesting, because I think one thing, the older you get and the more you get to be in sort of real law environments, you see how important lawyers are, just generally how society operates. People, companies, and all situations will always have a lawyer involved, and it's sort of an interesting perspective, particularly because I think more from a commercial perspective, I think people really look at you as like a trusted advisor, and you are people put a lot of trust in their lawyer, because it's sort of you're there to manage sort of uncertainty in those situations that they don't really understand. So it's sort of, you get that sort of sense of like importance, and it's pressure, definitely. I think it's definitely, there's an element of pressure to it, but I think through your legal education, you should be sort of confident that you are in a situation that you can manage that. And I think that's sort of why I wanted to go and do law, because I could see that I think it's a really important role in society, and I honestly couldn't really think what else I would really do. So hopefully that answers it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan, for sharing your experience. It is very interesting, I think, because yeah, mostly Indonesian and mostly my student, they don't have any idea why they do law at the uni level. Thank you for sharing with us, Brendan. Next, I pass to Kiagus. He raised his hand to ask a question to Brendan. Kiagus, you still with us? You can deliver your question directly to Brendan.
Okay, thank you for giving me a chance, Mr. Gede. I want to ask a basic question, maybe two questions, yeah, that maybe we want to ask as a law student in Indonesia who want to check. Okay. The first question is, what should we prepare both mentally and academically to take a law major in, especially in QT, especially for us as Indonesian student that have a lack of experience to study there. I want to gain so much information about the Australian culture and what will we do there as an Indonesian student. And secondly, the second question is, I want to ask about, are there any some kind of part-time job that we can apply there while studying law in QT? That's all about my questions. Thank you.
Yes, that's a great question, Kiagus. I think he want to go to Australia to study in Australia. Good luck, Kiagus. I support you, Kiagus. Yes, please, Brendan, you can reply to Kiagus' question.
So in terms of preparing for it, I guess it would sort of depend on how you're getting there. I think from my experience actually going to like University of Jambar and QT, I think one thing about the law is that particularly law students, it's that it's quite, there are differences, but in the end of the day, it is you're studying law, and then you're always going to find similarities between the two. So I wouldn't be stressing too hard on whether there's going to be a complete difference between the way that you study law in Indonesia and the way you study law in Australia. I guess one thing is, I know that in Indonesia, I think you pick between civil and criminal law quite early, I think. You don't do that in Australia. So you can do a criminal law subject if you want, but you don't necessarily specialize into any of those. So I think that would be one difference to definitely maybe consider, because it's actually not an entirely lot amount of criminal law subjects in Australia. You definitely get a more balanced sort of take on it after the end of the law degree, and then you can specialize into criminal or civil law. I think in the end of the day-to-day is quite the same. So you go to classes. You normally, it depends on how many classes you have a day. I think normally my average day was, I think I started in the morning and then I would leave around 3 p.m. I probably only go to university 3 days a week. That's about it. And I know some people who went less than that. Particularly nearing the end of my degree, I think I only went in 1 day because all my classes were on just the 1 day. So there's definitely no requirement to come in every single day of the week. You only come in when your classes are in. And then again, you can do your classes online. So I think there's that. And then the last question was with the part-time jobs. Definitely. I worked part-time jobs since I was like year 9 in high school. A long time. Basically, I would say more students work a job than there are students that don't have a job. It's very common, particularly for international students, because you've got to actually pay the fees, I believe is how it works. I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, part-time jobs are very popular amongst students. I think you'd find that if you came here, all your friends at QT would basically all have jobs, you'd think. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Brendan, for reply the question. Is clear, Kiagus?
Yeah, it's pretty clear. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
if you want to add more questions, you can add more question to Brendan. This is for a bachelor degree, right, Kiagus? You ask a bachelor degree or master degree or PhD degree?
I think it's more like master degree, maybe.
Oh, master degree.
And PhD, of course.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Is that clear, Kiagus?
Yeah, it's clear. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, before I pass to other participants, Brendan, I also want to ask you a question and also did a bit more explanation about exam and thesis. I heard that you did not do a thesis, you didn't write the thesis, right? So this is a good news for Indonesian students here if it is applied in Indonesia, because mostly my student also is getting stressful when they must do their thesis at the end of the study. You know, they are mostly getting stressful. So why legal education in Australia didn't put a thesis as a mandatory for students? Is there any reason or is there any information you can share with us? It is quite interesting again, because you just maybe do a course and without any mandatory requirement to have a thesis or submitted a thesis at the end of your study at law school. And secondly is about the exam. What kind of exam that you have been passed and faced in the past So maybe you can share also about your experience and opinion about exam at law school in Australia. That's
Sure.
2 questions for Brendan.
Yeah, no worries. So I think in terms of the thesis, so at QT, you don't need to do one. But like I said, I chose to do one, so it's an elective. But you don't actually have to. I know at some universities you have to, but it's not a mandatory requirement of all universities. I'm not too sure why, to be honest. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I think really the only requirement in terms of education is making sure you have the Priestley 11, the core subjects. I guess we do a lot of essays that are in a way sort of like a thesis, but definitely not to the extent of how in-depth research you need for a thesis. I definitely can empathize. It's a big project. Yeah, so I'm not too sure why we don't do that. But I did one. I thought it was actually really rewarding. I thought it was quite interesting to have sort of like a piece of work at the end of it that was sort of your thinking. It's quite, because I guess that's the point of the thesis, is you need to find a gap in the research and the literature and sort of address that. So I think it's interesting at the end of the day to have something like that and something you can be proud of, to have like that piece of work. And in terms of, or actually I would add that theses are actually quite impressive in terms of when you're applying for jobs. I think it's quite, if you have a good thesis, you can get it published. There's a lot of things that you can do. So I think it's always a smart idea to really put in the work for your thesis. Well, I guess especially in Indonesia, if you need to have one, so that's probably important. But in terms of exams, QT is a bit of an interesting one. I know in some law schools in Australia, you have like 100% exam. So one exam is your entire subject. If you fail that, you fail the subject. At QT, it's different. It's sort of, they're normally 60% of your grade, and then 40% will be like an assignment. So that's normally how it gets broken up. At QT in particular, the exams are very practical. It's always like a made up situation with a client, and there's a problem and you need to solve it. So very similar in a way, it's as similar as you can get really to actually practicing. But that's not always the case for a lot of unis. Some unis are more theoretical and then focus more on applying the principles and really understanding why certain principles exist. So a bit more of a theoretical aspect, a bit more essays in the exams. But that wasn't really the case at QT. It's more problem solving. The exams normally they used to go for like 2 hours. And then I think by the end of my degree, they were going for about 3 hours. So I'm not too sure how that equates to what's done in Indonesia, but that's normally the case. They don't really get any shorter than that at QT for law anyway. That's normally the time period. So yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you for your explanation, Brendan. So we have about 25 minutes to go. We're going to have a break for a second, Brendan. And for everyone who want to ask a question or maybe curious about legal education in Australia, please be prepared. You can ask Brendan a question or some questions. So to Pa Abbas, and to all the participants, please have a break for a while. To Brendan as well. We have a break for a while. We're gonna listen and show a video from Pa Abbas. Pa Abbas, you still with us, Pa Abbas? Please, Pa Abbas, you can show a video for us to have a break. Pa Abbas? Okay, I think he's not ready yet. I'm so sorry to Brendan and to participants. Okay, any other question from the participants? Okay, if not any question, I will ask Brendan any more question. Is that okay, Brendan? I think,
Yeah, no worries.
yes, I think it's a bit, difficult for my students to ask you directly. I will try to be a representative of my students, because they have lots of questions about study law in Australia, but they're difficult when they want to say directly to Brandon. I also curious about the difference between, study law in Queensland, for example, and study law in Western Australia. Is there any difference in the subjects? Because I heard that when you choose to study law in Queensland, you must understand about Queensland's law particularly, and that is totally different with, for example, in New South Wales law. And then I think we need more explanation from Brandon about when you choose to study law, whether in Queensland or in New South Wales, which ones is better. So maybe like, what is the reason when you choose, for example, Queensland, or you choose, for example, New South Wales or Melbourne, for example? Yes, please, Brendan.
I say I only picked Queensland just because I was born here and I just didn't want to move. So that was me, wanted to stay at home. The differences, I guess, is, you definitely learn, the focus is on Queensland law, but I would say that you definitely don't just focus on Queensland law. For example, you'll get brief citations and references to the other states. I think the benefit is, in a lot of the cases, not all the cases, it really depends on the area of law. The requirements are quite similar between the states. It just sort of depends. When you get into more niche subjects, like perhaps mining or planning and stuff like that, that's when you'll start to see the differences. But in the core sort of subjects, I think from my experience, personally, I found them to be quite similar. In the end of the day, the skills that you learn in law school is sort of that research skills, and so that you can more easily, if you need to go research another state's legislation, you get taught how to do that. You might not necessarily learn what that legislation says, but you'll be taught how to cope with that problem if it comes up. Like I say, over my experience working in firms, I've looked a lot at Victorian legislation, New South Wales legislation. So not stuff that I've learned necessarily at university, but I got taught the skills on how to research that stuff at university, if that makes sense.
Okay, yes, because you are Queenslander. Yes, I think that's correct. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Brendan. Because in Indonesia, we normally study law wherever we want, in Java or in Borneo or in Papua. We can choose everywhere, but it's still the same law applied to all Indonesian citizens throughout the country. Maybe it's the difference between Australia, because when you choose to study in New South Wales, you must fully understand about New South Wales law, rather than, for example, you study law in Queensland, so you need to learn a bit more about Queensland law. I think that's the difference, right, Brendan?
Yeah, I'd say that's right. Yeah.
Okay. My next question is about law school and justice school. Many students in Indonesia asking me about the difference between a law school and justice school, because I did my PhD in justice school at QT, and I also, saw many students in Australia, they also do bachelor degree at justice school. So what's the difference between law school and justice school in Australia? And is there any other justice school in Australia, at other uni in Australia, not just at QT, for example? So you can please explain to us about the difference between those schools, Brandon.
So I've never really done anything in the justice school myself. However, I have a few friends that have done some parts of that. Sorry. So I think the big difference would be, if you have a justice degree, it's not a Bachelor of Law. So you can't just have a justice degree and become a lawyer. It's more of a focus, I think, from what I've seen, on more policy sort of decisions. So you've got policy and governance, criminology is a big part of it, policing, And you can actually do majors, I'm pretty sure, when you do in the justice degree at QT. So you can major in like psychology and criminology. Don't really think that's an option if you just are doing the law degree, from my memory. Justice degrees are quite popular, I think, for people that want to get into policy decisions in like government or policing. I think is a very big one. A lot of police officers will have a justice degree. It's a pretty common thing, I'd say, around Australia. QT wouldn't be the only university with a justice degree. One thing is it's a lot shorter too. I'm pretty sure. I think it's only 3 years. So that's one thing about it. A lot of people do both, to be honest, justice and law. That's a pretty popular combination. But I think you consider laws in the justice degree, but I think a lot of it is more the impacts of the law on society, as opposed to you really applying the law to like a factual scenario to sort of come to an outcome of what the law would say. It's definitely more, if we introduce this law, is it properly addressing the problem that it's supposed to in society, as opposed to, I think, in a law degree, you get, here's the law. You might do a bit of that policy analysis, but it's like, here's the law.
I think is Brendan is out.
My bad.
Yeah, Brendan, you still with us?
Okay.
Brendan? Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
awesome. Did you get all that? Did I finish it? Or
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome.
Yes, that's a clear explanation about justice and law school. So just to make it sure, so when you choose law school, you're gonna become a lawyer, or mostly the subject was about thinking like a lawyer. So you're gonna teach to become a lawyer, right? When you enter and choose law school. But when you choose justice school, you are not becoming a lawyer. Am I right? Or maybe you need to give more explanation about it, Brendan? Oh, sorry, Brendan is out again. It's about Wi-Fi maybe. Brendan, you still with us?
Yeah, sorry. I think I keep disconnecting. Sorry. But yeah, I heard that. That's right. Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay. Okay, Brendan. Any more questions from the participants? If there is no more questions, I think we can close this international public lecture. Again, thank you very much to Brendan and to all the participants for joining this international public lecture. But before we are closing this international public lecture, I please to Pak Abbas to play a video for all of us. Pak Abbas, you still with us, Pak Abbas?
Ampar-ampar pisang, pisangku belum masak. Masak sabigi di hurung bari-bari. Manggalepok, manggalepok, patah kayu bengkok. Bengkok dimakan api, apinya cengcurupan. Nang marah batis kutung, dikiti bidawang. Nang marah batis kutung, dikiti bidawang. Ampar-ampar pisang, pisangku belum masak. Masak sabigi di hurung bari-bari. Manggalepok, manggalepok, patah kayu bengkok. Bengkok dimakan api, apinya cengcurupan. Nang mana batis kutung, dikiti bidawang. Nang mana batis kutung, dikiti bidawang.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Thank you very much for being with us, and I'm keen to see you in Jember or in Brisbane, either one. So in the future, and keep and stay healthy in Brisbane, and to your family. Same greeting to your family and your colleague in Brisbane. Again, thank you very much to Brandon especially, and to all the participants. My apologize if there is any inconvenience when you joining this event. Thank you very much again to all of us. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. See you.
Thank you.